Sejam bem-vindos a mais um Family Cast. Sou Felipe Simões, diretor da IPG, e é uma honra estar aqui apresentando um convidado muito especial para vocês, alguém diretamente dos Estados Unidos da América, de Oklahoma City, um amigo meu, um mentor, que veio agora para o Brasil para lançar o seu livro em português, a primeira edição do livro que ele escreveu, chamado Clasticidade, um livro que fala sobre os princípios da neurociência aplicados à sala de aula, para aqueles educadores que querem realmente transformar a educação e não apenas levá-la adiante. Eles querem realmente fazer parte daquilo que precisa ser feito na vida dos alunos. Então é uma honra estar aqui com o Ron e quero just want to share this moment of joy with you, Ron. And I mentioned about the book, right? And this is, I guess there are many reasons that brought you here, but I think one of them was that your book is in Portuguese now, right? How does that feel for you to know that your book is in Portuguese?
It's kind of unbelievable. Not anything I would have ever imagined. I think I really feel like God has a hand in it. I think He had a hand in the writing of it, and I think I'm grateful that there's opportunity for it to be used and shared, and to have it in Portuguese is just beyond my imagination.
And do you think other languages will come into action for this book or for others?
It wasn't something that I prompted. So if that happens, then praise God, and we'll just see. Yeah,
that's really cool. Well, tell us about the book, right? Like how did it get started for you? Because I've written a chapter of a book, and that was hard enough.
Yeah.
Right. Like having the time and how did that come for you? Like writing this first book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think the genesis of this book really happened when I was doing research in my dissertation on social emotional learning, and the chapter 5 of the dissertation is the final chapter, and in it you report findings, and then you also report on future research. And it became very obvious to me when I was doing my literature review and studying of the types of resources that were out there available to teachers that were related to neuroscience, neurodiversity, that was relevant. Like within the last 5 to 10 years, there was really a limited amount of resources available. And so I knew when I was doing my dissertation, because I couldn't find a lot of great resources, that there was a gap that I might be able to fill. And so as I was studying and learning, I had like a side notebook that I was writing things down that I was learning that teachers should know how to do. And so once I got beyond my doctorate work and I had some time, God opened up a window where I was able to write, and so that's really what started it all.
That's really cool. And I like that you said that you're filling the gap, right? Because I believe that whenever we start to explore different areas of knowledge, of understanding, and usually we stumble upon areas that maybe no one has really gone down that path. Was that kind of what spurred you along then?
Yeah, so my background is I love psychology. I love educational psychology. I've taught educational psychology for about 15 years, and I've always enjoyed reading about the giants in the field, but so many of those researchers are 50 or 70 years ago. And as you know, there's so much change that has happened in what we know about the brain and what we've learned. And to not have more relevant resources that are applying the latest research for teachers, it just seemed like a gap that needed to be filled. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's so special that your book is now in Portuguese, because I had talked to you about this before, but a student who is in a doctor program here in Brazil read your book in English, right? They had a hard time finding it because I guess she had to buy it on eBay and had some trouble, but this Brazilian student had read your book already. And that's exactly what she said. She said this was one of the most recent studies done on how the brain shapes what teachers should be doing in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice that the gap that you filled and that you've observed, right, has been helping many teachers already in Brazil before it was translated to Portuguese.
That's so. It just seems incredible. It's hard to believe. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah. So we're glad your book is in Portuguese and available, and we're happy to share this material with Brazil, which has its challenges with education, as every country has, right? And we really are excited, of what's going to happen from here on. How is this going to progress? And since you didn't expect this to happen, it wasn't part of your game plan, right?
Yeah.
So I guess we're just moving it along, right? We're
seeing what happens next.
Yeah. Going with the flow. That's really cool. Now, tell me a little bit about So Classicity has to do with helping teachers, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, teachers should be focused on their students, right? On the kids. And I hear you say that a lot whenever we talk.
Right.
It's like teachers should be focused on the kids. Now, tell me about how this research and how this book doesn't only just help teachers, but how does it help kids truly learn,
Yeah, so I know that you and I have talked a little bit about social learning theory and Albert Bandura and how we learn by watching others. And so that's especially important in the classroom when teachers are modeling for students how to behave. And so the teacher that maybe gets frustrated with the student in the corner and yells across the room, hey, stop that. What they're communicating to the whole class is it's okay to yell in anger in my classroom. And then yet if a student yells in anger, that's not okay. So students are really quick to pick up on those inconsistencies and that hypocrisy, if you will. And so part of it is helping teachers be able to manage their emotions in the classroom so that never happens. And so the behavior that they're modeling for students is really what they desire from their students. And so education's in a really interesting place right now with how difficult the job is, how much the teacher's being asked to do, and the stress that's involved with that. And so I don't know that teachers have ever needed more training and support in that social emotional area than now. And so the study that I did, it was about social emotional learning, but the focus was on perceived self-efficacy of school staff. So how capable did the staff feel like they were in supporting social emotional needs?
What was some of your finding? How did they evaluate themselves?
So the most, I guess the thing that really helped me in writing this book was there were really specific things that teachers did not feel comfortable with. And so that's where I started to create my list of self-regulation and what do I do when I get stressed out and how do I manage that?
So it's not like you were just studying the brain and studying how the different parts interact, but your study went really deep into research with teachers and what their struggles were, right?
Yeah. And so what I did was, as I learned more and more about where teachers felt vulnerable or ill-equipped, I made notes and I really looked for what are the things that they need in those moments, and those let's take those most important things that they can implement relatively easily if they just have the information and make that available. So that's really what the book's about.
That's awesome. And when you think of asking these deeper questions, right? It's really about making sure that the information that we have, it's reaching the right person at the right time, at the right moment, right?
Yeah.
So this book, what I want to understand from you is that it really helps. It's really meant to help teachers because that's where you started from. You really heard them, right? Now, and I think that's fascinating because not so often, like very frequently, right? Books that are geared towards education, they don't seem to really get down to the emotional level that teachers of what they feel, right? Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I think a lot of the books that we read, like in professional development, they have great ideas and great information, but they stop short of giving you like real practical ways to implement that. Like, even short checklists and here's what it looks like to do this in your classroom, working examples. So I think even though there's a lot of good information, it's like, okay, this is good. I know what the research says, but how do I do it? And so that's the back half of every chapter has implementation strategies. Here's how you do it. So it's probably as important that the teachers know how to do what is most effective as it is for them to understand why it's effective.
Awesome. It's the deep work, right?
Yeah.
Now, and maybe I'll stretch you with this, or maybe it's something you've considered, right? But a lot of our focus here at the school, and I'm sure this is where you guys are in the U.S. at the lab school, is giving families the right tools as well, right?
Yeah.
And as you interact with the families, have you done similar research into what the struggles are that families face at home?
With parents?
Yeah. Because that was the starting point, right?
Yeah.
And with the teachers, but I'm not saying you should write another book, Familisticity, right?
Yeah, maybe. That's funny.
But when we think about the information that families should have, right? Do you think that's is that something you've done in terms of trying to go deep into those struggles as well?
Yeah, I think when I looked at the study and tried to, so part of it was narrowing it so that I could go deep enough that I could come out with something meaningful. But I understand, I think your question and your point, and I think it's really important because it takes a village, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about parents partnering with teachers and teachers partnering with parents, working collaboratively with students that have neurodiverse needs and parents that are frustrated and don't know what kind of help to get, and schools that are in the same boat. And sometimes it takes, bringing in a specialist. And so I do think there's a need to help parents understand maybe limitations of what schools can do, and helping them find that balance of when do they need to get more help than what the school can provide. But also maybe, to your point, a set of maybe instructions or guides or principles of these are things parents should be doing at home to help their kids be more, balanced, to be able to manage their emotions, to be able to be more responsible, to exercise more executive function and improve their decision making, those kinds of things. Yeah, I think there's probably maybe a handbook for a parent that could be out there.
Yeah. And then I guess it's more kind of adapting, right, the findings, but maybe going deeper into what those struggles are. And I ask this because we we constantly want to hear what the parents have to say, and I was just curious if you have found some common trends that parents face, at your school, that maybe are similar to some things that we face here.
Yeah.
That our parents face, and they're looking for a solution.
Yeah.
They're looking for a different way of thinking, maybe.
Yeah.
They're not, and a lot of our goal here is to say, hey, this partnership matters. What we do matters, but what you do also matters at home for the kids' growth and education.
Right.
So could you speak into that a little bit more
in
terms of what those what are the things that parents could be doing, right, and maybe should be doing that sometimes it's that could really further their kid, in school and in life.
Yeah, I think one thing that there's some context, I think, to understand here. I think parents for the longest time have always relied on schools to help them understand if their students are having learning difficulties or challenges, that the school will somehow discover that and help overcome that. And so historically, the way that that's been done is, we can go back a long ways and look at a traditional special ed classroom where every kid that had any kind of need that was beyond what normal would be, we'd put them in a classroom together. And that would be a very difficult classroom, and even maybe a multi-age classroom, right, where there were students of different age that had no business being together in a social context for learning. But that's how the schools managed that kind of problem.
It's kind of like parents were just hoping that the school will figure out if their kid had a problem or not, and if they did, the school had to kind of just deal with it on its own. And
I think the way that the schools have learned to approach that has changed drastically. So the success would rise and fall based on the special ed teacher. And then we've seen like a broadening of the programs and maybe more specific interventions. So we find out exactly what kind of help the student needs, and we'll pull the student out of the classroom just for a period of time, give them the specific things they need, and then send them back to the classroom. We've seen that trend happen, and schools try to do that more and more. I think the difficulty comes in how we see and even maybe label special ed, right? And so I think it's really a disservice to all students, because it's like you have to have a certain level of disability before we can help you. And if you fall short, too bad. You're not bad enough.
It's almost like there's this in-between zone, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're the smart kid, and then you are just, or you have a really severe disability.
Yeah.
And then in between,
right,
like, I'm not going to help you that much because you're not that smart. And it's kind of, you have to either lower yourself down or kind of go up. Right. Is that kind of what you're saying?
So I was saying it's really a matter of context. How do we see the problem? So if we look at every student as unique, and they are, and their brains are different, they're not all the same, and we look at strengths, that obviously all students have strengths, even ones that have profound differences, to appreciate what their strengths are. Part of what I write about in here is teaching to those strengths. So recognizing, let's say if you have a student that has dyslexia, you're not going to assign them to read aloud in class if they struggle to read. But what we know about students with dyslexia is they're actually really good in conversation. They are good at generating ideas. I mean, there's a role for them to play in the discussion where you can bring their strengths forward, and they don't see themselves as a person that really struggles. And at the same time, we work to integrate dyslexia strategies and therapies that help them.
So here's a question to that, because I like that you mentioned, and you gave a good example, right, of teaching to the strengths. I like that phrase.
Yeah.
And when we think of a student with dyslexia, I think what I often see, both in the classroom and even at homes at times, it's like there's an expectation that my kid has to read super well, right? Like, and because tests are that way, because the world is this way, and I have to, and they're not smart enough if they can't read really well.
Right. They're like, maybe they're incomplete because they have dyslexia.
And then it becomes like a sense of, right, the student he's an incomplete student then, right? Like, and then as a parent, like, I think the feeling that they have, and they often portray that, I believe, to the kid is like, you're not as good as I would have hoped you to be, right? And maybe for the student, he starts to feel that way as well. But you talked about adapting, right? You said, how can we adapt the strategy to meet the need, right? And that's pretty far, like, ahead, I would say, or of most of reality, right? How does this impact teachers, who are usually stuck to, no, this is how I always test, and parents saying, this is how I see success, right? Success is when you get an A in writing. Or should parents and teachers be thinking differently? I think, so there's a few things. I think there's an ideal world that you can construct in maybe a classroom that looks quite different than the traditional classroom. And I also think there are ways that teachers need to think differently about their role and what they do in the classroom. So if I speak to maybe strategies and ways that we do education differently, I think opportunities for group work, project-based learning, assigning students roles based on strengths, and not removing the responsibility of learning from them, but we teach teachers to teach and differentiate instruction based on student abilities, and we also adapt content sometimes based on abilities, maybe how we present the content. So it's using both sides of that, creating an experience. So I love experiential learning, where you have groups that are getting different, maybe differentiated instruction, but the same content. So they're still having to learn the same material, but maybe the way that they learn it is more presented in a strength-based way, so they get to understand the material. And then at the same time, in that project-based learning setting, you've created a social setting. So now we're not just teaching academics, we're teaching social skills. And we know when we put kids together and they start to interact, inevitably they're going to have strong opinions that differ. And so we teach them how to work through conflict and manage their emotions and things like that. So I think you get a much more complete picture when you create an experience, and education is framed in an experience instead of, the traditional, here's your assignment, read these pages, write your report. And what if they struggle reading? Or what if they have dysgraphia and they can't write so well? Or what if they have a processing issue where it takes them twice as long? Those settings don't necessarily fit every student. So I think we have to be more creative in how information is presented, and more holistic too, because it's not just about, did you learn the information? It's, do you have skills that will serve you well in life? And do you know what your strengths are? And do you know how to use those strengths? Yeah, what I hear you saying, it's almost like kind of like a personalized package, right? Based on who you are and what you're really good at, right? And I guess what I hear may be a struggle from a lot of teachers and a lot of parents is, well, it seems like you're lowering the bar, right? Because you don't want my kid to do this because he's not as capable. So, but he has to, because life is tough, and he has to kind of hustle through this. And then, how do we speak to that this idea of, because I understand we're not lowering the bar,
right?
But I think people perceive it as that sometimes, like we're lowering the quality of expectations.
Yeah, I think this is where research really becomes important. If you take the traditional classroom from 50 years ago and compare it to a lot of the things that we do in what we would call a traditional classroom today, we're using some of the strategies that we've learned from, that research bears out, that the level of understanding and knowledge that students have today at like the 8th grade level, they don't even compare to what 50 years ago. Our kids are so much more capable of managing information and thinking about things. Now, I think the content obviously has changed some, and the world obviously has changed a lot, and maybe even the life skills of what's needed. Those things have changed. But I think as we talk about neurodiversity and the needs of neurodiverse students, which I would say all students, right? So what parent wouldn't want to know the areas where their students struggle most and find ways to address those areas and play to their strengths, right? So their students able to have confidence in learning, but also we're going after some of those areas that we know they need help. So I think I think we are entering a time where individualized learning is possible, but you can't teach social skills individually, right? You don't learn how to negotiate by talking to yourself. Maybe you do, but not the same, right?
It's probably going to be awkward.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah, if you're that guy talking to yourself at the corner, but I think we have to relook at the way that, how we see the classroom. And it doesn't mean that we completely throw out everything either. I think we still have whole group instruction. I think we have small group instruction. I think we do paired instruction and even a lot of individualized independent work, where we teach students to be responsible. We create a sense of agency. I think all of those things need to be happening. And it sounds like, well, that's really complicated. And how do you manage all of that? I think teachers, good schools do that today already. It's just a matter of how much do we really trust students to take control of their learning, and is that even the expectation? Because I've been in schools where first and second graders, they know what they're supposed to do and they do it, and nobody walks away from their responsibility.
Can I ask more?
Yeah.
Kind of go deeper into that, because when students are controlling their learning, that sounds like a big fear for people, right? Big fear for parents sometimes, but at the same moment, like, nobody wants a 30-year-old man living with the parents. We want our kids to grow.
Yeah,
right?
We want to raise adults, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what would you say are the? But I believe that's something that has to start soon, right? For students to control. There we go. Helping our producer.
Sorry.
Our producer is struggling a little bit, and that's it. We're human, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That's a good proof that we're human.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's good. But when we go into this idea of students controlling their learning, right? It may sound to some people like you're just do whatever you want, right? But what's the role of the parent and the teacher for students to control their learning? Because there is a role still, right?
You bet.
And what is it?
So I think that's a really great question. So when I say autonomy, I'm talking about something really specific, right? So autonomy is a self-directed learner. And that means that, one, they recognize it's their responsibility to learn. So they're not waiting for the teacher to say, hey, it's your turn to learn now. They're always saying, I'm responsible for learning. So I'm responsible for listening. I'm responsible for following instructions. I'm responsible for doing the things that I know I can do independently without asking for help. If I don't need help, if I can do it, I should do it. So I don't think it's any different than the idea of, I said we're raising adults. There's a really great book that is titled How to Raise an Adult. And the idea is we're not raising children. We have children, but we're really trying to raise adults. And so one of the rules in there that are the principles that they uphold is when you teach a child how to do something independently, you show them, you walk them through, you teach them a responsibility, how to do it right. Once they've proven they can manage that, then you don't do it for them anymore. So like it's as simple as teaching your child to make the bed. And once they know how to do that, it's their responsibility. So now you let them do that. You make sure they do it, but it's their responsibility. They take ownership of it. And I think that happens in the classroom when it's expected. A lot of times the teachers feel responsible for the students' failures. So if a student fails, it's, oh, that's my responsibility. I need to do it for them, or I need to do more of it for them. And it's like, no, it's okay if they struggle. Let them struggle until they, gain the skill that they need. But once they have the skill, expect them to use it. Mm-hmm. So it's not just saying, you're in charge of your own learning, go figure it out. It's like, no, we have an expectation. Here's what we want you to learn. But then we let them struggle with it. They might make mistakes, and that's okay. We keep working.
Because that's where learning happens, right?
Right.
The mistakes. But I like that you said to clarify expectations, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what gets in the way a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just I didn't know that was my expectation that I should be doing it, but at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our own actions, right?
Yeah.
Wherever we are, doesn't matter if and teaching that and clarifying that to your kids soon enough, I believe that will help them to grow and to be a better adult.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they know that's expected from them, because that's been told.
Right.
And I think maybe that's something that parents should be doing more, right?
Yeah.
Like clarifying, like, son, daughter, I expect
Yeah.
you to do this. Like, I expect that you would be, right? And
and let me just interject something here. Not only that, but to pay attention to what the student is interested in learning. So when we talk about self-directed learning, sometimes students are ready to learn something maybe before you're ready to teach them, but they're ready and capable. So I'll give you an example. My son, he was in second grade, and he told me, he said, I want to know how to do my own laundry. And I was like, you're in second grade, dude, we can do your laundry. And it was like, but I stopped myself and I said, wait a minute. He's asking about gaining independence. And I tried to, assess, do I think he can do it? I think he probably could do it. So I was showing him, here's how you do your laundry. Here's how you sort darks and whites, and you put them in the washer, and here's the dials, and this is the soap. And my wife walked up on me and she said, what are you doing? And I said, don't worry. I gave her that, that look like, don't worry about it, I got this. And
that was the hard part, right?
Yeah. And then afterwards, but he learned how to do his own laundry. And since he was in second grade, he's done his own laundry. Now she asked, why would he ask you how to do laundry? Like, you don't know how to do laundry. Like, she was critiquing me, but that's not the point. The point is, he was curious, he was capable, and he asked for independence. And I met that moment and said, okay, if he's ready, go ahead. And once he learned how to do it, I let him do it. And he was, it's liberating to be able to be in control and do some things.
That's fascinating to me.
Here's something really interesting too. So the research shows that when we do things like that, it increases our perceived self-efficacy. So that was part of my study, was perceived self-efficacy of teachers, right? And their ability to carry out social emotional learning in the classroom. But when we look at perceived self-efficacy, and this is Bandura again. So when we talk about perceived self-efficacy, if that's high, then what you get is a naturally curious learner who sees themselves as capable of learning, and you get a lifelong learner. It's just they're hardwired for it once they get high PSE. The research also shows if they have low PSE, that's the group that's most likely to be in poverty. And regardless of what the environment is that they came from, if their self-perception is that they are not capable, I mean, they could be from the most affluent place with every resource available to them, but if their mind is telling them, I can't, eventually they're going to spiral down to a place where they're not capable. And so much of that is geared towards how they feel about themselves learning. So I think parents have to capitalize on opportunities when students or when their children come and say, I'm curious, can you show me? We should be jumping all over it, even if they fail, right? Even if it's like, we'll try it, and maybe you're not ready, we'll try again later, but...
because you're building on that self-efficacy, then like you're building who they are and how they believe in their own capacity.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Yeah, and we do that in the classroom too. And I think when we ask students to be self-directed and we build autonomy in that sense of I can manage my own learning, it's not like we're shifting responsibility, right? It's we're empowering students to do better learning.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. And what I understand from it, kind of to put it all in a clear way for me, there are moments that we need to be clearer about our expectations, right? Of what the kids should be doing so that they can get there and do a good job. But on the other hand, I shouldn't limit myself to only my expectations.
That's right.
I should really be also paying attention, because maybe the student wants to exceed my expectation in something that I'm not prepared to do.
That's right.
But if I'm only focused on my expectations, which even if I'm just doing a good job at clarifying that, it's not good enough for the kid,
right?
Because they have their own kind of way of thinking, right?
That's right.
So I need to be paying attention to them to say,
open.
like, hey, like I didn't think about that, but I should probably plan something on that, right?
Yeah, or at least consider, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? That they try and fail and that they found one way that doesn't work and you're encouraging a growth mindset. I mean, what's wrong with that? So, yeah, I think teachers have to be willing to take risks. Just go back to for a second, the idea of when you do experiential learning, you create lots of scripted experiences, but there's so much that happens. The learning happens outside of the script, right? There's those social emotional learning moments that happen, or maybe there's some new information that's discovered or a new way of applying information. And students might get really curious and really interested, and you just let them run with it because that's what learning is.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I would love, Ron, if you could just look at the camera there.
Sure.
And for those who will watch it online, right? But if you could just give a message of hope to parents and teachers, of saying like just a final word of encouragement to them, because I feel encouraged, by hearing you, but maybe they're listening and saying this is just too much for me, and it's too far off, and saying the system doesn't work this way, and my kid is a struggle. Well, can you just speak into them that, and I think we can finish off with that.
Sure. Well, let me say first, I thank you for all of this, and I've been blessed by this whole conversation. I guess my message to parents would be that sometimes neuroscience and neurodiversity and all of the complexity of the mind and the details of everything can kind of get in the way of reminding us that the brain is connected to the heart, and the key to the brain is through the heart. And so I think loving children well, focusing on what they do well, and helping them as they struggle, encourage them to struggle well. And then look for opportunities where, as you learn about some of the differences that your children might have, there are plenty of resources out there to find small strategies that you can use to help students overcome some of those challenges. So that would be my encouragement is, one, you're not alone, but love your children well. That's a really big start. And then whatever little things you can learn to support them and grow them into capable adults, I would just encourage you to do that.
Muito bem. Pessoal, esse foi mais Family Cast. Quero só agradecer o Ron mais uma vez. Thank you, Ron. This was amazing to have a recorded conversation with you at this high level. It's awesome. E, pessoal, esse livro aqui está disponível. Se você gostou do que você ouviu e você está interessado em aprender mais sobre esse assunto, você tem esse manual aqui, que é ótimo para você, que é educador, e você que é pai e quer saber como ajudar o seu filho, né, a se desenvolver. Esse é um livro fantástico. Então, que você aproveite esse conteúdo, compartilhe e fique conosco aí para mais episódios do Family Cast.